Welcome to the Career Connections podcast, where recruiting leader Stephanie Alston and operations leader Amie Thompson share real-world insights to help you navigate the job market, build confidence, and find the right career fit. Let's get into today's episode.
Hi, Amie. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I am doing good. It's almost Friday.
Yep. So we are starting off our new initiative, which is Career Connections. We came up with that 100 years ago and never did anything with it. And so we're going to start with this podcast talking about career and how to help people find the right fit, find their right job, find the next job if they're looking to make a change. And so we're going to have some fun having these conversations, and we will get started just by doing a quick introduction of, why this topic is interesting to us. So just kind of share with the audience, why are you so interested and passionate about helping people with their careers?
Yeah, so I am Stephanie Alston. I'm the CEO of BGG Enterprises, and we connect job seekers to companies seeking to hire more diverse executive talent. And so why I'm so passionate about it, especially right now, is because the job market is in shambles. And Amie and I have had so many conversations about the job market, about resumes, about applying for jobs, and the list kind of goes on and on. And we decided that this would be a great opportunity for us to be able to share the knowledge that we all have collectively to hopefully help you land your next dream role.
Yeah, and I feel the same. My passion is all around helping people in general. So whether that's starting a business, whether it's starting your career. And so it is something that we've connected on. And I think what's interesting about our conversations is that we bring different perspectives. So you are a recruiter by trade. And so you're focused on sometimes working with clients and then helping match the right candidates to the roles that the clients need. And then my experience is a little bit more on the HR side. So I have been in companies where we've hired people like you, or we've done it ourselves to try to find the right fit for internal jobs. And so I think those two perspectives coming together would be really good to just tell the story of like what people should be doing and what people should be working on. But you are much more knowledgeable about this market that we're in. So share some perspective, some thoughts. We're in the first year of a new administration, which usually shakes things up a little bit, no matter who it is. But what's going on as far as people who are looking to make a career change or looking for a new job? What should they be aware of?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I think you'll get a kick out of this. There's a new term that is floating around online called job hugging. And if you remember, it used to be something that was going around called job hopping, which means you
Mm-hmm.
go from job to job. Well,
Mm-hmm.
job hugging means that you are relentlessly holding on to your job because you are so afraid that that job may not last forever. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think at the height of the pandemic, we saw the great resignation. And so lots of people were leaving their jobs. They were switching. They were taking sabbaticals and resting. But now we are in a period of high inflation. Interest rates are really high right now. And so because of that, many companies are either tightening on their hiring or they're laying off. And so because of that, again, people are now job hugging. And so they're not jumping from job to job. What I will encourage job seekers right now in this market not to do is leave their job. And well, let me rephrase that. Do not leave your job unless you have a new job
That's
already
right.
up. In fact, I did the numbers before we hopped on today, and right now, unemployment, there are 85,979,000 jobs that were lost in August, and that's the highest that it has been since August 2020.
Wow.
In addition to that number, just in 2025, over 300,000 Black women have been laid off in the labor market. And so we are seeing really high unemployment numbers. And to be honest, Amie, just to be able to share this with you in full transparency, those numbers are probably very much higher than what they're being reported as. And that is simply because we all know people who refuse to apply for unemployment. There are some people who are
Yeah.
being denied unemployment. And so there are also people who are on unemployment for 12 weeks and then they fall off and they never get a job. And so I think we should just be wary that, yes, the number is high. And so that's going to make the market much more competitive. that we've probably seen in quite some time.
Yeah. And one thing about unemployment, which is interesting that you brought up. So I'm currently not employed, but I did not apply for unemployment this time because I do some things on the side. And what I do on the side certainly isn't enough to like cover full-time work, but it's more than what unemployment pays. And
Right.
so it's just like if you do have a side hustle or you have a business on the side, then you wouldn't qualify for even those little benefits. So then you're not counted, in the bucket, but I'm still actively looking for a job. So yeah, I think you're right. The numbers are gonna not be 100% correct, but I think the trends is what you look at. And you said it's the highest since August of 2020. So yeah.
And let me actually jump in on that. So you actually can still apply for unemployment if you do that side hustle. So obviously, as you know, unemployment is a weekly check that you receive that in
Yeah.
most cases you're paying into. However, if let's say for instance, if you were, I don't know, driving Uber, right? Because there are lots of people out here who are driving Uber or they're door
Yeah.
dashing, you may not make so in North Carolina, I think unemployment is around $300 or $400, right? If you
Mhm.
are making say $50 as a freelancer, you can still apply for unemployment. You
Yes.
just have to report those numbers. And
Yes.
so if you know that your income on a week to week basis is not going to always be really high, don't be afraid to
Yeah.
apply anyway, because I'm always a firm believer that having a little bit of something is better than
Yeah.
nothing at all.
Very true.
But in your case, if you are freelancing and you're doing contract roles and you do know that it's significantly more than what unemployment is offering, then yeah,
Yeah.
there is no point in applying. But I definitely think, Amie, there are lots of executives out there who are just like you, who are looking for work, but also still actively freelancing on the side
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, it's certainly not for everyone, but I think that I would always recommend to people have something that you can do on the side because like you'd mentioned earlier, we're in a market that's a bit unpredictable. It's unlikely you'll find the perfect fit in a short period of time. And so a couple of other recruiters I've talked to said like 6 months you should be prepared to not find the job that you're looking for. And so in that time, have some consulting that you can do or some kind of freelancing that you can do to make sure maybe at least your core bills are taken care of, but you don't have to dip into your savings and things like that if you can. And so even if you have a full-time job, it does not hurt to have something on the side just in case, because everything is just really unpredictable right now.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the number is actually right now, there is less than one job opening for every unemployed person in this country right now.
That's
Less
wild.
than one. And I will say that, even the advice that they told you is to be prepared. Keyword prepared. So anything can
Mm.
happen, right? Things can
Yeah.
shift and, doors can open up, but be prepared for 6 months, especially if you find yourself at the executive level, right? Like you've been in the
Yeah.
work for, 10 years or more. Expect that because there are lots of executives who are currently on the market right now, and that's just pure numbers, right? So when companies lay off, the first that they typically lay off are those with higher salaries.
Right.
I mean, it sucks, but it's also the reality, which means the competition is much steeper. And so you
Yeah.
may have an executive from Microsoft, from Google, from an ad agency, from a startup, all applying for a very small amount of jobs. So also just keep
Yeah.
in mind, you're still great at what you do. It's just a little bit more competitive out there.
That's right. Yeah. No, great advice. Great advice. Anything else you can share about the market and what people should be expecting?
Yeah, so I know it seems like I'm the bearer of bad news, but I actually have some good news as it relates to the market. As of what's today's date? Today is September the 18th. As of September
Mhm.
17th, the Federal Reserve actually met yesterday and they cut interest rates for the first time in 9 months by 0.25%, which is really good. That will make it a lot cheaper for companies to borrow. And why that's really important right now in this market is that the reason why many companies are tightening is because they're not able to borrow money in the way that they used to, right? And so that money is what helps them sustain during these high inflation times. But if they can't afford to borrow money, they also can't afford to hire. And so what
Mhm.
we're hoping is that by cutting this very small percentage point, it will help signal to the labor market that the Federal Reserve is considering just how tough it is out here in the market and help make it easier for them to borrow. They are expecting to be able to cut interest rates even more before the end of the year. So I don't think the market is going to shift to that automatically, like it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we are seeing the burden being shifted a bit. And I think we can be hopeful if they continue to cut interest rates that by the end of the year, we'll start seeing more job openings appear, or perhaps if you're in a role right now, maybe even an opportunity for a raise.
Hmm. That's really good because I saw you post a lot on LinkedIn about things like this, and they're just things that people don't know, don't hear about, or don't understand how it impacts job
Yeah.
seekers. And I think, interest rates initially would never come to my mind and think, okay, that has some impact on how many jobs are opening and available. So I think it's great. Do you have places or things that you suggest people read so that they can stay on top of things like this to understand the market a little bit better?
Yeah, so one thing that I definitely encourage folks to pay attention to is the Federal Reserve meetings that happen. I think it's at least once every single month. Pay attention to those interest rate cuts because, again, it will help signal just how tight or maybe not tight both the labor market is, the borrowing market. I mean, what the Federal Reserve decides impacts everything from jobs to houses to inflation. Those things actually matter. Like, yeah, they can sound really boring, but if you're looking for a good sign or a bad sign in the market, those
Mhm.
interest rates really do matter right now. I mean, I can even speak personally to my business, right? When I am having conversations with clients who are interested in filling roles, they're saying to me, hey, Stephanie, I can give you a better idea of if we're going to hire after this Federal Reserve meeting
Mhm.
because they're borrowing money, right? They have to keep borrowing. If they're borrowing money, it matters how high of an interest rate they're paying because that impacts their bottom line. And so, again, it's those little things that actually have a really big impact on companies' decisions to even hire, especially at the executive level for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing that is interesting to me is like timing, right? So we're in September now. As
Yeah.
we get into the end of the year, as we get into holidays or we get into the new year, what have you seen historically with the shifts in the market because of, the time of year?
It's very interesting, right? It depends because
Mhm.
last year we actually experienced within my business for sure with hiring something called the September surge. So from
Hmm.
September, October, November, all the way up to December, right before Christmas break, we were actively hiring for executive roles because they wanted to get candidates in before the end of the year.
Right.
Now, or at least offers in, right? So even if they start in January, they wanted to get those offers in before everybody went out on break. What I
Mm.
will say right now is that we're not quite seeing that surge that everyone has been expecting, but that is simply because everyone is waiting to see what interest rates will look like by the end of the year. This has been a really tight year for many businesses, even some very well established companies, too, right? And so, because it's been such a tight year, most people are afraid to make moves without fully understanding the political picture that we're in
Yeah.
right now. The political environment, whether people believe it or not, it really does shape the world that we live in. At the beginning of the year, when we changed administrations, many people were hopeful that this would be a year of complete growth. But I think as we've seen the market go up and down, those sentiments have changed. It seems very unstable. And so, because folks see the market as being unstable, they're afraid to make big moves as it relates to
Mm.
growth, and that impacts their growth strategy. And as we know, a part of your growth strategy is what? Hiring. So,
Yeah.
I think as we get closer to the end of the year, maybe we'll gain a better understanding, but I'm just not seeing that uptick this year. So it kind of fluctuates from year to year depending on the political environment.
Hmm. No, that's good to know. That's definitely good to know. I think the other thing that I would ask for your feedback on, and I have some thoughts as well, is just like the mental state, right? For people who are looking for a job, you've got the market that you need to be concerned about. You have, and even if it's not, I've talked to someone last week who is employed, but is scared of getting laid off just because of the way the business is going. So even people who aren't currently out of work are still dealing with some of like the mental stress of whether they're going to have a job in the next few months or not. And so what are some of the things you're seeing just with people and their focus and their thought process and their mental state as you might be considered a job seeker or future job seeker?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think people are really experiencing a lot of burnout, right? Like it
Mhm.
has really been a year of being on pins and needles. I mean,
Mm.
that's just the reality, right? I mean, it is what it is. That is where most people are right now. But a word that I continue to share with job seekers and just folks in general is just continue to be resilient. Try
Mm.
to avoid the urge to stop, because this is not the time to stop. In fact, now is the time to be even more aggressive. I know a lot of people tend to see the end of the year as their time to be able to relax. It's the holidays. But I actually say, for now, try to buy into a new strategy, right? Try to go as hard as you can if you're looking for a job now, so that in January you can actually rest in that new start for yourself if possible. I mean, at one point, Amie, I think people felt pretty confident in being selective in the roles that they applied for now, right? I mean, I'm
Mhm.
actually reading things now where people are applying for like 50 jobs a day. And so that lets you know
Yeah.
just how competitive the market is. But in terms of folks' mental health, it's hard, right? It really is. But I'm just encouraging folks, to the best of your ability, try to listen to things that inspire you. Try to lean on your community. Don't try to do it alone. There's strength in number, there's power in community. And I don't mean that just because it sounds good. No, there really is power in community and networking. And so lean
Mhm.
into that. Don't try to do life alone right now, because if you try to do it alone, you will definitely burn yourself out, because life is not a solo sport at all, especially not right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. No, I think that's great, and I feel like, you mentioned 2 things, but networking is pretty
Yeah.
significant. We'll probably have a whole conversation on networking and how to network and who to network with, but I think I heard a stat last week, I have to find the exact number, but it was pretty high, just the number of people who found their next position through someone that they knew
Right.
versus just applying blindly to things that are posted. And so I think that, when you go back to what you were saying, people are applying to 50 jobs a day, but what is that really gaining people if
Yeah.
they don't know someone who works there or know somebody who knows somebody? And so
Correct.
I think there's this balance. I think that is what kind of causes the stress too, is like this balance between aggressively applying for things, but also how do I network so that I'm not just applying, like you said, in like a solo type of world, because that's not going to usually reap rewards. And
Right.
so, yeah, the networking piece is significant. That, and for those of us like me who are not expert at networking and really good at it, it is a muscle you have to train, because there's just, whether it is your business, your job, your relationships in any way, you need a network to
Right.
help you get where you want to go.
I agree. And this can be a conversation for another day, but I think it networking is definitely a strategy. And even if
Mhm,
you're only doing it to the extent of you and I, right? We have a conversation, I
mhm,
connect with somebody. I think most people think networking is this big room with lots of strangers and trying
mhm.
to work the entire room. And I'm very much like you. I'm an introvert. And so I don't enjoy trying to work a room. That's really
Yep,
difficult for me. But like you said, it is a muscle that needs to be worked. But then also understanding that we are in a market now that when you're applying for jobs, there are some jobs you're applying for where no human is seeing your resume. It's completely AI. And so to
yeah.
be able to circumvent that, it will be really important for you to actually know someone internally who is real, who can read your resume and then advocate for you to gain that spot.
Yeah. And I think from an HR perspective, I've always been the type of person that if somebody reached out to me, so Stephanie says, "Hey, I have somebody who might be a good fit," I'm going to talk to that person. Whether
Right.
or not they're a good fit, I'm still going to talk to that person because they're coming to me from somebody that I trust. And so I'll at least would have given them 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Let me try to understand what their skill sets are, because maybe they're not a fit for what I'm looking for, but I might know somebody else. And so that power of just using your network, using your relationships is it's pretty huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty huge. And like you said, that's how you can somewhat circumvent the tools and the technology that are really screening a lot of the resumes and a lot of the applications, is to make sure that you're using, the who you know factor. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah, yeah. So let's see. One of the other things, so we'll talk about networking on a future episode because I do think that's worthy of a whole
I
whole
agree.
thing. Let's get back to kind of how many things you should apply for and what you should apply for. So part of it is a numbers game. The
Yeah.
more you apply for, the more likely you'll get an interview or, a couple of interviews and then hopefully a job. But what I have found in HR is people who just blindly apply for jobs and don't even spend time, it doesn't seem like, looking at the job description or researching the company, and their resume is not, tailored to the job. Like, it's so obvious that they don't really know what they're applying for. And so for me, it's a little bit hard. It's like, so what would your suggestion be to job seekers of how you still keep that volume in place, but still also make it appear that you do want the job that you're applying for?
Right. Yeah. I think you do have to use some level of intention, right? I
Mhm.
remember my mom used to tell me this all the time is that applying for a job is a full-time job. And it really is,
Yes, it
especially when
is.
you don't have one, right? And so I think as much as it is popularized that you should use AI tools to mass apply for jobs, I actually discourage against it
Mm.
only because I have seen, as an example, I have an open requisition for a head of sales role. Well, if I see your resume and your headline at the top of your resume says head of TV production, I know you did not actually read the
Yeah,
job description and you mass applied. I mean, those
that's
little details actually matter. So if you are going to mass apply, make sure that you are mass applying to the same job with the same job title. So at least
yep.
it appears that you took an effort, right, to actually
Yeah.
read the job description, to know what you were applying for. Because again, it is a numbers game, but you also don't want to waste your time applying for jobs that don't even match the resume that you just submitted.
Yeah, yeah. I agree, and I'll tell you, I would usually get an attitude when I see things like that because it's like, "How dare you?" You're wasting my time at this point,
Right.
and so how likely am I gonna read your full resume? I'm not, right?
Yeah.
If you see something at the top that doesn't even give any indication that you care about our company or that you have read what we're looking for, because I always would try to say to people, when people create these job descriptions, in most cases, it's not done lightly. It's not like
Right.
they're just throwing something together. They're putting thought into the type of person that they're looking for, and the reality is the answers are right there. Like, it's
Right.
literally take a pop quiz, the answers are right there in the job description, and all you have to do is read it and then kind of tailor your resume, your LinkedIn to that so that you can hopefully have somebody want to talk to you. A resume is not gonna get you a job, but it
Right.
certainly could get you a conversation or maybe an interview, which will then hopefully you'll be able to pitch yourself and sell yourself. But yeah, people not matching their resume or cover letter to the job is a pet peeve for me.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, Amy. There's still power in the cover letter, right? Especially in certain
Yeah.
ATS systems, because there are some ATS systems, whenever we as recruiters or HR leaders see your resume, there's a
Mhm.
blank page if you don't put in a cover letter.
Mm.
So if there's
Interesting.
someone who puts in a cover letter, it may just catch my attention just visually because I don't see a blank page, right? And so
Right.
then if it's a great cover letter, they may draw me in even more. Now, there are
That's
some
right.
people who say they don't care about a cover letter, but I mean, again, it depends on your ATS system. If that's the first thing I see is a cover letter versus, not, I mean,
Yeah.
that could be one thing that makes or breaks your opportunity to make it to the next round in the interview process.
Yeah. I agree, and it's like it does take a little bit more time when you're applying to write that up, but even if somebody doesn't care about it, then they'll just skip over it, but if
Right.
somebody does, that's gonna help you hopefully help you stand out, which
Correct.
is half the battle in this kind of market is how do you stand out? How do you avoid just looking like one of many? And sometimes the cover letter can do that for you, and you can certainly show your personality a little bit more than you can in a resume. You can tell a story a little bit better than you can in a resume. So I think it's definitely worth it. But I have worked with people who are like, oh, I don't like cover letters, or people who
Right.
say, if there isn't a cover letter, I'm not paying attention to.
Right.
So it does, it's very subjective, very
Right. Oh,
subjective.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Let's see. And so, yeah, I think another thing too is about standing out. One of the things that it's kind of funny to be honest, but as I've been working on my resume and working on my LinkedIn and thinking about different ways to describe what I've done in the past, and then as I'm networking more and talking to people, and then I hear those same phrases, I'm like, dang, okay. So it's like that's not really unique. All right, great. And so it's like, what advice might you have to people on how to stand out both, you know, conversationally, let's say in an interview, but also on your resume and your cover letter, and how to not make it seem like you're just using a lot of buzzwords or keywords, but actually you're showing your personality a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say that whenever you are just showing up for a job interview, right, or just showing up in real life, right, I say just show up as yourself. I mean, people
Mhm.
really do value authenticity. And nine
Yep.
times out of 10, if you are only using buzzwords, most folks can read right through that. And they're just like, okay,
Yeah.
this is not who they really are. So allow your personality to shine bright. Like it is really okay to be you because at the end of the day, you are you for a reason, right? It is
Yeah.
you who makes, this role that you'll be stepping into very unique. So that's one thing that I highly recommend. In terms of your resume, it's really hard to be extremely unique. And I say
Yeah.
that only because, again, if you're running your resume through an ATS system, you don't want things that are going to kick you out because your resume is too unique as well. Because there's some
Yeah.
ATS, which, sorry, disclaimer, let's break this down. ATS is applicant tracking systems. So that is
Mhm.
everything from Workday to LinkedIn to Indeed to ZipRecruiter, and the list kind of goes on and on. There are some of those systems that when you upload your resume, if you have a ton of graphics, if you have a photo of yourself at the top, if you have videos, those things will automatically spit out your resume just because
Mm.
it can't read that data. The technology hasn't quite caught up in that way. And so I just say try to keep your format and your template very plain and simple because at the end of the day, yes, your resume is great, but save that for once you get the interview, right? Then you can come in with creativity, but you don't want
Yeah.
to not oversimplify. Is it oversimplify? No.
Or
You
not
don't
be simple enough because
right, yeah,
you
right,
want it
yeah,
to be simple.
right. You want it to
Yeah.
be simple, yeah, you wanna make it as simple as possible just to
Yeah.
ensure that the system actually reviews your resume, gets it into the system, into the right hands, and then, once you get the interview, then you can perform and do whatever you wanna do creatively.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that is really important with standing out because I do see a ton of advice, right, saying, "Hey, add, a pop of color to your resume. Don't be afraid to add your picture." And while it may sound great from like a personal branding standpoint, folks will folks will say that with no experience of what people like Amie and I also see on a day-to-day basis, which is
Yeah.
you can't do that. That is horrible advice to add a pop of color to your resume. Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
be careful of the advice that you take in this market as well, because not all good advice that sounds good is actually good advice.
Yeah. And I think that is so important because it's also just the time, 5, 10 years ago, if you're hiring, you might get 50 resumes. And so, yeah, if you see something that looks a little unique, maybe that stands out. But now people using these ATS systems, people getting 1,000, 2,000 resumes for a job that they posted 2 days ago, no one has
Right,
time to go through that. And so if
right,
you are a human, not using ATS, but you're a human going through resumes, which I have done, I'm not looking for creativity.
right,
Get to the
yeah,
point. Tell me why you should be talked to, because
right.
again, the resume isn't to get a job, it's to get you a conversation.
Oh,
And
that's
so it's like, how can you get to the point as fast as possible? That's the other thing, and we're gonna talk more about resumes a little bit later in a different episode, but get to the point as fast as you can, because if I have to dig and search for where you're a fit or how you're a fit, it's just gonna, you just move on to the next person. So I do think keeping it simple is really important, and then keeping your most important information as soon as possible, I think is the other important part, and making sure it's tailored to the job that you're applying for.
Yeah, and I just had to write that down because that's actually great advice. The resume isn't about getting the job, it's about getting a conversation. And I
Yeah,
think that really sums up the whole conversation about resumes, right?
yeah,
Is that I think oftentimes you're thinking about, wow, how can I create this resume to get the job? And it's just like 9 times out of 10, the person reviewing that resume is not the final decision maker. They are
that's
just
right.
the one who is reviewing your resume, right? And so
Yeah,
you don't have to worry about impressing them. You need to impress the people who will come after that, who actually
that's
have the
right.
power to decide if you should get the job or not. So great advice
Yeah.
there.
No, that's absolutely right. Well, let's see. One thing, as we wrap up, let's just go back through some of the takeaways, some of the high points of what we talked about. And this was really talking about the market and just high level things that people should be looking to do. But the market is tough, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible or that it would be impossible for you to find a job. You had mentioned strategies, right? You've got to have a good strategy for what you apply for, a good strategy on networking. So you have to just be more intentional than maybe in years past. You also, I think, have to be patient because it may take a little bit longer than what you're used to. And so it's like trying to stay positive, trying to understand the realities of where we are, but know that there should be a job for you, right? You just have to be patient to find it. I think that Building visibility is another thing we'll talk a little bit more later. That involves networking, making sure people are aware of what you're looking for. You
Oh,
can't make an assumption that somebody, just because they know you, knows what kind of role you're looking for, what kind of company you like. So have those conversations with people. I feel like 9 times out of 10, most people want to help us. So if
ab-
you have somebody in your network and you let them know what you're looking for, most likely, if they're, you have good people in your network, they'll look out for you. They'll say, you know what, you should talk to this person, or why don't you go to this class or join this group. There are so many different pieces of advice people can give you. But I think the key is making sure that you understand what the market is like so you don't get your hopes up too high, and you keep things simple, but you also come up with your strategies.
yeah, absolutely. And I just want to echo one thing that you say too about talking to folks, right? I want to
Mhm.
just put this out there. Do not be afraid to say that you are looking for a job. Like, don't be
Mhm.
afraid. I encounter so many people who say, I don't want to post on LinkedIn that I lost my
Mm.
job, or I don't want to tell people. And I had to
Yeah.
say, "Hey, you got to tell people, because if you don't tell people, no one knows that you need help and no one is going to send
Yeah.
referrals your way. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to speak up. You are not alone. It is not just you. This is not a silo, right? It's not just happening to
Mhm.
you. It's happening across this country. Don't be afraid to acknowledge it, and then just do what you have to do in order to land that next role. Just, use your voice, and don't be ashamed, because there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, I think that is great advice. And we will end our conversation here. This is going to be our first of many conversations, the job blueprint, and helping people at various levels in their career find their next opportunity. And as they are on that journey, or as you're on that journey, just some tools and strategies and tips and things to be aware of so that your job search strategy is as clean as possible, as straightforward as possible, and your search is as positive as it can be. So, Stephanie, we will talk again very soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Career Connections podcast with Stephanie and Amy. Connect with us on LinkedIn for more career tips, resources, and conversations that help you grow with confidence.